even with some professional expertise. And I think we'll start out by encouraging people to look at the situation we have here regionally in terms of the animal's point of view. Getting through our system of development and roads, thinking about what it might be like for them, doing some research, having some conversations with people who are interested, and engaging the community on this important topic that most people have really very near and dear to their hearts, and of course, fitting very well with the mission of EMAC. And we hope to keep in touch with you and hope that you will also keep in touch with us as we go forward.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak, either in person or on Zoom?
Can I just ask a question? Is this going to be a 501c3?
No, just an informal community group for now. Just starting, launching very slowly, and you know, being visible at this point.
Should someone email you if they want to be on a mailing list for information about it?
Yes, that would be great. And you can probably find me. Yes.
Elizabeth, I see your hand up.
Yes, I was just curious, does the group have a name yet that's forming?
Not yet.
Thank you.
Is it Save the Dells who is initiating?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to speak, either in person or on Zoom? Going once? Going twice? Okay. Okay, now item number 3, announcements and updates. Does anyone have any announcements or updates?
Is that right?
No.
No, ma'am.
I guess I have one. The city of Prescott is starting our comprehensive plan update. They have a committee. We've started meeting. We're hoping in February to have the website launched, and we'll have the surveys. We're working on the survey questions now. And then we're probably in, what was it? My little scripture. May and June, we're going to be planning on open houses. We're hoping to do 2 in May and 2 in June to get more community input beyond just a survey. So 2023 is our outreach. That's what we're going to be doing most of 2023 is just community outreach to get everybody's input. And so I'll let you guys know and send you the link to our website and to the surveys once they're ready and available. That's all I have right now. Anybody else? Okay.
Room.
Okay. Next, item number 5, CYMPO updates.
Madam Chair, members of the EMAC group, thank you. So just a couple of things. Let's see. So at the end of each year, we for the executive board and the TAC have a discussion regarding the positions of chair and vice chair, if you will. This currently for the TAC of which the EMAC serves under, if you will, Norm Davis, or the town of Prescott Valley, was the chair for the technical committee. Norm is no longer with the town of Prescott Valley, and the vice chair was the city of Prescott, or Ian Mattingly. And Ian will continue to participate on the TAC, but he's asked to not hold any chair or vice chair at this time. So with that said, Dan Cherry, who's in the room with us, Yavapai County Public Works Director, has accepted to be the chair of the technical committee. As you know, he's been the liaison for the EMAC group to the TAC. So I think part of his negotiation with me was he'll accept the chair if somebody else from the TAC would serve as the liaison to EMAC. So you all are losing Dan to the EMAC, if you will, but to the TAC. Frank Marbury, who's the Chino Valley Public Works Director, will be the liaison for EMAC to the TAC. And he is running a few minutes late, but he will be here shortly. So Dan is the chair of the TAC. EMAC, or Frank, will be the liaison. And then on the executive board, the current chair is Mayor Palguda from the town of Prescott Valley. And this coming year, there's Frank Marbury, by the way. This coming year, the executive board, the chair will be Supervisor Craig Brown, and that starts January 1st. And the vice chair will be Mayor John Hughes on the executive board. So just a couple updates on those things.
Mayor Hughes is going to be vice chair of the TAC too, if I recall.
Yes, I was drawing a blank on that, and I was hoping eventually it would come, but it didn't. Thanks, Dan. And then with that said, you know, thinking back to the last EMAC meeting we had, and maybe some, you know, frustrations with projects and roles and responsibilities, I've been a good planner in trying to figure out, you know, how do we effectively move forward, and how do we achieve what the mission of CYMPO is, and EMAC specifically. So I'm gonna, I guess, kind of give you a coming attractions, and we'll see if we can't get everything ironed out just after the first of the year through the TAC and through the executive board. But what my intent is at this point is we do have a new funding source for CYMPO. It's called the Carbon Reduction Fund. The Carbon Reduction Fund is, we're getting just under $200,000 a year. It's like $185,000 a year. And it's under this new transportation bill. And as we're finding out what we're able to do with it, clearly its focus is to reduce carbon, if you will. And I would tie in this infrastructure bill, there is a lot more monies available to the environment, to wildlife, to things that are very much of EMAC's mission. But the reason I'm bringing that up is it's my intent, at least through staff, to make a recommendation to the board that we go ahead and commit dollars to do a carbon reduction study in the general sense that what is CYMPO doing to help the environment first and foremost? What are we doing to reduce carbon? What are we doing to promote the environment? What are we doing as it relates to transportation, wildlife specifically? All that to say, we believe that in the early part of next year, we can bring in a consultant that's going to do a couple different things. Number one, give us a plan. And within that plan, it's going to work with EMAC, the TAC, the executive board, and CYMPO staff to specifically identify projects. What projects would EMAC be able to focus on really in the next year and even beyond? Many of you might be familiar with our regional transportation plan, and if you are or not, within that plan, we have a list of projects that have been prioritized for the region. And when I say prioritized, it takes into account the public's input. It takes into account funding that we have available, regional priorities. So it factors in a lot of different things, because as we all know, it's always easier said than done. So same thing for the EMAC list. We would like to be able to provide you with your input, a list of projects that are attainable. We know in this group, we've talked about from, if you will, the low-hanging fruit to maybe some of the bigger things. So low-hanging fruit might be just signage, if you will, on the side of the road for tens of thousands of dollars or less, to this maybe an overland bridge, a wildlife bridge over a particular road that might be millions of dollars, and everything in between. So with that said, though, as much as we've talked about it in the abstract, it's our intent that this plan would again go through a formal process with your input, the public's input, the executive board's decision of outlining what are possible projects. That's the first question. And then the second question, and this is more important, is can we put that in a priority order? You know, what is a way for EMAC to know a list of projects, not only a menu of say 10 projects, whatever it ends up being, but really what's the order of those projects? That's the most important thing. So identify the projects, identify EMAC's specific role in that. You know, when this was formed several years ago, when I look back at it and I look at what was initially provided, there's quite a bit of informality there. And I think that informality has probably promoted some tension over the years as to roles and responsibilities of EMAC members, the mission, the responsibility, where it fits within CYMPO, within projects, within the region. When I came back a year and a half ago, again, that frustration of EMAC just feels either left out of the process or an afterthought. And again, we've been trying really hard to move away from that, to get you at the earliest possible position in all transportation projects. So all that to say, it's my intent to bring in a consultant to look at what we have spelled out for EMAC projects, scope of projects, cost of projects, and then even more importantly, again, how do we deliver those projects, which is what we keep coming to you. What are those grant opportunities, funding opportunities, resources, so that these projects don't just sit on a shelf, but they're actually things to be able to be delivered. So the plan, again, would cover a much more broad environmental range, but within that plan, there will be a specific section that will talk very specifically to EMAC, so that, again, there's not this tension, if you will, of you all are just sitting here wasting your time, but instead it's a good use of your time. So by all means, I respect your passion, I join your passion, and I just want to be able to work with that and respect everyone's time and energy. So with all that said, that's my intent. Have not approached the TAC on this or the board. I'm working with staff to identify funds that we have available, the scope. After we do that, we'll approach the TAC and say, look, this is what we would like to do. I'll allow them to give input to it, allow you to give input to it, and then ultimately we would take it to the board. With what I outlined, I would expect a relatively short turnaround time for a consultant. You know, our regional transportation plan, will run 12 to 18 months. Highway 69 master corridor plan is going to run 12 months. Something like this, in my opinion, should be a 3-month or so process. But again, that's a very tentative thing. So the reason I tell you that is I would hope, by summer, if not fall, again, we would have some guidance for EMAC and again, the direction of EMAC. So with that said, I hope that gives a heads up of coming attractions, and I'm happy to take questions and comments on that. JD?
Each time I decide that I'm going to be quiet at a meeting, you bring up something like this.
You should not be.
First of all, will this consultant be supplanting Lindsay, or will Lindsay still be with us?
I would never ever want to supplant Lindsay. That's my rule.
Insert plan.
No, JD, I would compare it to any of our process. Any consultant is going to work with all possible groups. So EMAC's going to have a front row seat along with the TAC, the executive board, and staff. Lindsay specifically, as Lindsay's the key person on this. You all are going to continue to shape that plan. We're not going to walk in here and drop a plan and say, surprise, this is what you're doing. You all are going to create it yourselves. The consultant's just going to be the one that's going to smooth it out and say, look, we heard this from JD, we heard this from Lindsay, we heard it from Frank. Now we're putting it together.
So in this new plan, does that mean that EMAC will be looking at perhaps more local projects rather than twiddling our thumbs waiting for the Sundog corridor, which may never happen anyway?
Good question. I want that to be a part of the discussion leading into the plan. I think there's pros and cons to both. If you ask me directly, and I'll offer my voice to the consultant, you offer yours, the greater groups will offer theirs. But we want to facilitate that. What does that look like? For EMAC to focus, if you will, solely on regional bigger projects or, to your point, maybe smaller local projects. I'll tell you, I'm open to both, but I think that needs to be, I don't want to say debated, but discussed through. There needs to be conversations, and a consultant will facilitate what are the pros and cons. Let's brainstorm it out. And then in the end, let's have a final recommendation. But that's a great point. That'll be a part of the process.
And the positive of us losing our wonderful former liaison.
There's no negatives.
But at any rate, I think that with Dan having seen all of us and worked with us and been a supporter from the very beginning of EMAC, he will be working with the other TAC members, and perhaps it had never occurred to them that some of the projects in Chino Valley or Prescott Valley or any of the vicinity agencies, that we might be a help in making some environmental impact on what before was just, we were not even thought of. So, and it might be something as simple as a sign. And of course, I owe Ian a huge debt of gratitude, because I had mentioned to him about the wildlife corridors that go across Hazley Road, and he was wonderful, and he installed 2 signs there, and it's made a big difference because people didn't think, especially new people, that there are some of those corridors that go right across Hazley, and there may be some other significant but previously discounted impacts that we could have in this area. So I'm looking forward to working more closely with TAC. Welcome aboard, Frank.
Thank you.
Thanks, JD. And yeah, Frank, we introduced you earlier as
Yeah.
just before you were walking.
Sorry, I was late.
It's all good. It's all good. So now I appreciate your questions and comments, JD. Any other questions or comments on my update, Dan?
We have-
Go ahead.
Oh, we have Barbara Jacobson on Zoom that has her hand raised.
Yeah, that's fine.
Just a second.
Barbara, if you unmute yourself. Yeah.
I did. Oh, is that good now?
Yes.
I think having watched EMAC for a few years, a number of years since its inception, I guess I'm concerned. Your consultant, I mean, it sounds good, but it sounds like it's only going to delay more, because now you've got to wait for this consultant to be approved, to come in, to, if I can quote, give direction to EMAC. So EMAC was not ever, in my vision, or apparently from what you're saying, a self-sustaining, self-directed group. As obviously they couldn't make anything happen on their own, it had to go through the upper channels. But it just sounds like you're now getting a new director of EMAC in here who's going to tell EMAC the direction it needs to go in. And I guess I'm concerned if this group has concerns and issues. And I think the concern for a long time has been that they're not getting the information they need in a timely manner to make their recommendations. So I guess it will have to play out, but I'm concerned the role of this consultant at this point.
Barbara, definitely appreciate your comments and points. Several things in there. I don't know that I'll be able to hit them all, but let me just hit a couple highlights. One is, hopefully I've been committed to delivering the projects as early as we know them to be to the EMAC group again, since I've been back this last year, specifically with Sundog Connector State Route 69 Master Corridor Plan. One example is Bryn's going to be in a few minutes talking about our bicycle pedestrian study. She's developing the scope as we speak. There's nothing concrete, if you will. She's approaching EMAC for their earliest input as to give us your parts of the scope that you would like to be. So again, there is, in my opinion, there's no earlier stages in these projects than the scope development. Number two, I guess my point from what I hear from you is a consultant to come in and tell us what to do. I would like to believe we never have that practice. We hire the consultant works for us, works for the region. They are the one that's helping us to, if you will, organize, facilitate the conversation. But CYMPO, which includes EMAC, the TAC, the executive board staff, again, oversees that consultant. So again, the consultant's not coming in to dictate, but they are coming in to facilitate the conversation. They want to hear, they will hear. Again, what are the issues? What are the questions, concerns of EMAC specifically, of the TAC, of the board, of staff, of the public, where are our opportunities, and then they'll put together something that, again, never is dictated to CYMPO, but is a recommendation of which then EMAC can say, wait a second, this, we never talked about this. The TAC and the board can also do the same thing. In the end, it's the CYMPO executive board that would take it into consideration with the hopeful approval of EMAC, recommendation of EMAC, the TAC. So I guess those were just a couple points. And then the third and final one I'll hit on is I hope we never just sit around and wait for anything to happen, but we continue to do the best we can. So I'm more than willing to have staff work with EMAC and not just wait for the process to play out. We have things in motion as it relates specifically to Sundog Connector 69 Master Corridor Plan, the active transportation plan, and other things. So those were just three highlights. But Dan, you had a question or comment?
Well, thank you, Vinny. I'll expand a little on that discussion for starter, which is, you know, the intent of bringing a consultant on board is to, you know, I think look at a more of a wide range of opportunities of potential projects and help to prioritize them. You know, I believe the EMAC is interested in something other than just, you know, these large scale wildlife crossings that everybody, you know, thinks of immediately when you think of ecosystem connectivity for your large fauna. But you know, there are greater things we can do with lesser money as well if it's focused properly, and we have buy-in from our member agencies within CYMPO. And so I think the intent is to give guidance not only to EMAC, but also to the TAC and the executive board with, you know, some sort of global analysis, if you will, or recommendations as to what's worked elsewhere, because I feel, and I believe Vinny is in agreement on this, that there is a lack of focus coming out of this committee at this point. So I think that the idea of bringing an expert on that, you know, has good ideas relative to this sort of discussion can work directly with EMAC members and give a little focus so that when it comes down to chasing money or utilizing existing expenditures, you know, whether that's with this carbon reduction funding that Vinny talks about or some other avenue, that we have some buy-in from those that need to be at the table in coming up with match dollars and whatnot. We're chasing grants. So that's
yeah, thank you. It sounds possible, and I guess hopefully it won't take too long, and we will see. Thanks.
Is there going to be, is that position going to be advertised so that some, including anyone who's in this room who feels that they might be qualified to apply, could apply?
JD, I would say my simple answer is yes. I mean, all the dollars we put with are tax dollars, so there's definitely a need for transparency in opportunities and posting of things, so that will go through a process that, for procurement purposes, we're required to do certain notifications, if you will. As to who's eligible, I guess it depends the path that we choose to go down. There's a couple ways of doing it, you know, on big projects, bigger than this, you know, you would have to go through like a request for proposal type process. If it's smaller like this, we could go out for quotes and we could use existing lists that have already been approved of consultants and others. But either way, we're going to follow a transparent procurement process.
Now, how does this tie in with the other consultant who's been working with Lindsay?
For us, I mean, they all tie together. We want everything, you know,
There
aware.
won't be duplication.
Correct. We want
Always wanna
everything
avoid that.
aware of. We want the region to be operating as connected as possible. That's our goal. So they're going to be communicating within that. You know.
If I could, Madam Chair, this is Lindsay. I just wanted to add, and this is actually a perfect conversation with Ms. Jacobson's question for what we wanted to discuss during this updates item on our agenda. So This consultant will also help us develop important policies that we want to bring up to the TAC and then up to the executive board. So Chuck had sent Allison and me an email with what he proposes, and this is the direction we hope our consultant will help us go. So what he sent was a corridor map that currently isn't, you know, a CAD developed map all the way around, so not, hasn't been put through the whole process, but basically Chuck proposing that we develop this map with known corridors and then develop a policy based on that with what we could then bring to up to the TAC and the board, and hopefully our member agencies jump on board with. So the consultant will also help us develop these strategies that can help us get to the point where we're not constantly chasing, where we're finally ahead of the 8 ball. So to Ms. Jacobson's concern about time loss, us as planners, this is kind of the dance we do constantly, tons and tons of projects going at once, and making sure that we don't halt our work while we do plans. It's just kind of the nature of our business. So there won't be like a halting of any of the work we do. We still have a lot to advise on. Bryn's going to share the active transportation plan, for example. But we're at a growth spurt in CYMPO. As you know, we now are a staff of 4, and that's kind of been the first time that's happened. So once we're here and our populations are growing, it is always a good time to go, now we need to make sure that we've got sound vetted policies in place so that we can professionally go after projects. There comes a point in organizations where you realize you got to stop and do those. So hopefully there's not a time loss.
But we're gonna be bringing in Game and Fish
Mhm.
and the Forest Department. Elizabeth, are you ready to work?
She's got a-
JD, I never stop working.
So that's also what we've been discussing internally and with Dan and Frank as well. For example, I just lost everything.
And I think
Well,
Yeah.
let me ask you this then. You got this and you gave it to the consultant. Can
We
we
will.
pass it around here? Does anybody remember this? This map, it was passed out about a year ago. I would like it to be a little bit more formalized.
Yes.
With EMAC, like a vote saying this is our framework of where we think wildlife corridors are. It has been developed through this wildlife linkages assessment that Arizona Game and Fish did.
How old is
Yeah, how old is it?
Oh, I think it's before JD got interested in all this.
Oh, that's-
I remember because I was part of that with the Game and Fish.
I don't see a date on it right now. I could probably go another couple more pages.
Probably 2017, 18.
Oh, way before then.
It was 2006.
What was that? That was
2006.
one, yeah.
That's what I have. but
December 2006.
Elizabeth has-
There was another one that the
Oh,
Game and
okay.
Fish was working on too
That
later.
was I think that was the Yavapai County linkages assessment.
Yeah, that's what it was.
That was, I think, right whenever I first started on with the department is what.
And that was after this one, correct?
Pretty sure, yes, sir. I mean, it was.
Yeah, okay. So we have the Yavapai, we have this, there are other studies that have been done that were used to develop this. So if we could get a copy for the group, and we can all start looking at it and saying, you know, this is very strong corridor, this strong corridor, yada, yada.
So what conceivably could happen is a consultant can help us develop policies around, or just simply EMAC recommendations. If you build something along this corridor, here are some of the mitigations we recommend you. You know, so this is the direction I'm hoping EMAC can head, and I think we're ready. So what we think the consultant can help with is roles and responsibilities, you know, assignments for like little bitty mini committee assignments so that we're not in quorum, but we're still working on the homework. You all want homework, I know. And so what I remember Dan and I talking about is, can we start to rethink how we can partner together with Game and Fish, Prescott Forest, to do counts of pronghorn again? You know, maybe there are things that we can sponsor and refresh that need to happen that can at least help inform.
And don't leave out the Arizona Antelope Association because they do a lot of work statewide with the pronghorn.
Thank you.
Also the mule deer group, I don't know the association name, but
Well, there's Mule Deer Association, there's Mule Deer Organization, there's Arizona Deer Association, and then there's one more. I'll put it in the chat when I remember it, but there's 3 different deer groups that we have across the state.
And
So-
if this is the most recent map, I think we should have it on the website.
Well, that's what we need to make sure. I just took it as this for an action item. I didn't have enough time to make sure that I had the most recent data, so let's have to.
Tammy, man,
Yes.
Elizabeth, these groups that are interested in these different, you know, animal or wildlife populations, do they do regular counts? Like, do they color these things on a regular basis, or does it take a significant effort to do a coloring project? You know, my question is, how often does this data get refreshed? Because we're booming up here with housing developments, things like that, and every time you have a new housing development come in, it's probably running the risk of changing migration patterns.
Oh, it definitely changes migration corridors when new developments go in. And so the outside groups are not responsible for collaring and research. That is our internal process that we have through Jeff Gagnon and Scott Sprague down in the research department. And then us internally within the regions, we also do a lot of collaring efforts. So as far as last time we had anything collared in that area, I would have to get with Jeff and Scott on that to see when those dates exactly were. I know here in the Kingman area, we just put out some mule deer collars and some pronghorn collars back in early October in the general 18A area. So that's going to be west of Seligman, because where we've done a lot of tree cuttings in there, just kind of see how that corridor is opening up for that. But as far as like the outside groups, like I said, they aren't responsible for the collars. That would be internally what we are. But like I said, I'll get with Jeff and Scott to see when the last time we actually collared anything in there. But with collaring comes funds, and with funds you have helicopter hours to be able to get on the ground. You have crews that you have to pay to deploy the collars. You have to purchase the collars, and then you have to run the time and that. So I mean, it kind of gets kind of expensive depending on how many collars you want to deploy. So I can talk with Jeff and Scott more on that, and maybe bring Jeff into the next meeting and see kind of if he wants to talk about that.
I know that the Antelope Association, because they do a lot of work with the barbed wire fences, the mediation on the lower one, and they seem to be monitoring a lot of the herd that was transferred from Prescott Valley down to the Sonoyta area. I've been a member and get regular emails from them, so they do seem to be very active.
Yes, Glenn Dickens, that's with the Arizona Antelope Foundation. They actually help us quite a bit with fence projects and going in and working with the ranchers to modify the fence so that they are antelope friendly. They're at least 18 inches off the ground, smooth wire on the bottom. We highly recommend 21 inches is what we shoot for, but 18 is the minimum that we actually require with the smooth wire on the bottom for antelope to be able to zoom under and go.
Yep, just for anyone who may not know, the pronghorn do not like to jump fences. They go under it, which is why they need to have at least that minimum of 18 inches.
Right.
Excellent.
Elizabeth, thank you for enlightening us. You know, I'm guessing that, you know, from a data collection standpoint, maybe some CYMPO funds are somewhat eligible for this. It may not be the carbon reduction funds, but maybe there's other things, you know, where there could be a potential partnership to show some commitment by CYMPO to you know, participate in some data collection, because obviously, you know, we can do all the planning we want, but if we don't know where the problems are, you're throwing money away at that point. So that seems to be, if we're interested in something that is, planning for the future, the more data we have, the better off we're going to be making sound decisions. All right, thank you.
Tammy.
Yes.
Yeah, I kind of got interested in this urban corridor thing and started driving up and down Highway 69 and realized there's a lot more open space, quote unquote, there than you initially think when you're driving at rush hour traffic. You're above all the washes and creeks and everything, so you don't see them. Ironically, we've had a couple projects in and around there. And I've been kind of getting out of the truck and walking around. And I approached Jeff to look at this segment of highway with me to determine if we might be able to get some ADOT funds to evaluate these potential crossings in that area. So I don't know if that's duplicitous or not, but I've started that process with Game and Fish or with Jeff Gagnon anyway. And hopefully we can tie that in to a grant from ADOT or Federal Highways to look at potential corridors that can be protected and then add that to this map. What is there? One thing I was thinking though, Dan, when you were talking is, do we want to, as EMAC, do a entire study of the central Yavapai County area all at once? Have that just be one particular study, not something that is for Sundog Connector, and then we do another study for the West Yavapai yada yada highway or Great Western Corridor, that it's all done at one time. Is that something you were thinking, or?
Just for clarification, that's our intent. I mean, that's, this thing I just talked about a minute ago, Chuck, will cover, it's solely focused on carbon reduction, environment, wildlife only. It's not tied into one project specifically.
Okay, so if we go for the money, we're gonna go for every place that looks like it's been.
Everything within the CYMPO planning boundary,
CYMPO planning.
which is
boundary.
400 square miles, or essentially the Quad City area.
That does not extend down to Cordis Junction.
It does not at this time. However, we are having discussions about expanding our boundary, of which one proposal is to go to Cordis Junction, to go down 69 to the I-17 and 169 to I-17.
Makes sense.
How soon is that thought gonna be codified?
That's a good question. It's bureaucracy. So, I would like to
Can we
believe.
assume and tack that on to this?
Well,
It requires governor
Yeah.
sign off, so that's a
Oh,
whole
is
other.
that right?
So my hope would be within the next year, because my fingers crossed, depending on the level of CYMPO expansion. There's three options. There's taking CYMPO countywide. There's taking CYMPO all the way to the south of Yavapai County and all the way to the west. And then the easiest option is the one that you just referred to, which is just go to Cordis and go to 169. So depending on which of those get a little more steam, we'll either slow down the process or speed it up, one or the other. I would imagine this one option is pretty straightforward and basic, and I don't expect many hiccups with that. And I do want to go back to your last thing about 69. Keep in mind that Lindsay's going to be doing the 69 master corridor plan. And part of that plan is to evaluate, again, those wildlife interactions with transportation and the environment. We're going to study between 89 and in Prescott and 169. So that 15.5 mile corridor, part of that scope is what EMAC had recommended us to put in there, which is again, environmental evaluations.
So is there funding already for the entire environmental assessment for the
There's
urban
funding-
corridor?
There's
Or
funding within the scope to identify opportunities to prioritize within that 15.5 mile corridor. What are the projects specifically, again, that are prioritized? And what are those projects to spell out what is the cost, what's the scope of them, what's the location, obviously? And then how do they get implemented? Is it through existing funds that we have, or is it pursuing, again, grant opportunities? But the biggest thing, first and foremost, will be to prioritize what projects, period. And that includes, again, environmental related projects. I would expect if there is an environmental study to be done in depth, that would also be part of the recommendation.
Is all the work that's being done on I-17 now, which of course has been much needed, is that going to make funds for some of the projects we might want to do where they're scarce?
No, well, I don't know that I would have an answer.
No, there's
My gut
money
reaction is
set
no.
aside. State has money
Yeah, they've
set
worked on that.
aside for that.
I guess it all ties together, but my initial reaction, JD, generally speaking. expect-
So Chuck, to go back to your question as to whether it's your efforts are going to be duplicative or not. I would say no. You know, if there's an interest in ADOT and Jeff with Game and Fish, you know, collecting some data along there that can feed into the master corridor planning study. I don't know why we wouldn't want it. if it's-
Well, the way I was looking at it is, the urban freight corridor is a federal program that ADOT has interest in. Right now, ADOT doesn't have much interest in the Sundog connector. So to focus along 69, I thought would be a good start for us to get a basic understanding of wildlife movement in the area. And that ADOT could fund that part of the study.
The ADOT needs to be actively involved in that study
Right.
because it's ADOT's facility. So if ADOT's willing to jumpstart collecting some data in conjunction with Game and Fish on it, that's great. It frees up other money within the existing study budget to collect more data in another aspect or another location or something. So, you know, I would never turn down an opportunity on that. And if it meets a brick wall, then fine, at least you've had the conversation.
Or if we can hand the ball off,
Yeah, I
we can do
Right.
that.
mean, it takes time to collect that data, I'm
Yeah.
assuming. So if there can be a way to jumpstart it and get it moving.
Well, my first hurdle is to convince Jeff Gagnon that there's enough space there to have wildlife corridor.
Sure.
Well, of course, we've learned that there needs to be that easement, that open space in, you know, for that corridor to continue, if we're gonna be spending $3 to $4 million. And then have it blocked off by a housing development, then, you know, that's just ludicrous. What also is, and I don't know, what are the plans so far for the 89 widening through the Dells? Are they still, is that still on the,
That's a City of Prescott project and.
I thought it was ADOT.
No.
Mm-mm.
City of
And
Prescott.
City
They
is
own
going-
that portion of.
City is going to have some public outreach on that here in 23 is my understanding. Just it's mainly, I think, they recognize that there's concerns associated with it. So Ian has indicated there, the city is planning on some public outreach efforts for, you know, to make sure the public feels educated and aware of what the intents are.
Yeah, that's their focus for the next year, is just some public engagement.
Yeah.
So I think Frank's point, asking about utilities, there is infrastructure that needs to be improved. So I think council has seen a tentative 5-year budget. I think it's in 2 or 3 years of like $25 million through there, with 50% of that going towards utility necessary upgrades to water infrastructure and other things. And I guess the greater question is, when those upgrades take place, you know, what road infrastructure may or may not happen. So, you know, what they've told us at this point is what Dan said, they're going to spend next year engaging the public, educating, talking it through. And we'll see if that, you know, $25 million actually happens as to their improvements.
I think it's a good idea that they're gonna be doing that public education, because I know that there's gonna be a lot of strong feelings about any blasting that has to happen in that area.
Yeah, and I actually, I sort of do it, but it was an education for me too. The city of Prescott does own Highway 89 all the way to the airport. Deep well. So even though, again, it's a state route, city of Prescott owns Highway 89.
The county actually has a piece of it from a GAFP connector down to in front of the VA. We have a little short piece, and then it's city up to the deep well.
City owns it, so again, ADOT will be consulted, but they don't own it's the city of Prescott, and they'll make the decision as to maintenance and possible improvements.
Maybe with their focus, and the other thing that I was thinking of too is that it's still on the table, that cooperative agreement between the county, Prescott Valley and Prescott, to try and acquire some of that state trust land and save Glassford, the remaining part of Glassford Hill. You know, that might go to that thought that we have about maintaining corridors, if that land is committed to being open space.
Yep, and that's still in motion. I think hopefully we all read the good news that the town of Prescott Valley was able to obtain $5 million towards that effort from, I believe, the governor's office. You know, that's, I mean, the resolution's already in place, and I think those municipalities are looking for the fundings to secure that.
Go get them.
Everybody. Yeah, so I think this endeavor with a consultant will help in a lot of different ways. Mostly what we just discussed, but also how well we understand our work at CYMPO and what EMAC can do to affect CYMPO. And then help us to help the public understand what we do as a group and what we don't do. There's a lot of limitations. So being a planner, there's a lot of frustration. Typically, we're used to existing 10 years in the future and then knowing that we'll probably never get to see the fruits of our labor because we've moved on or we've retired or whatever. So that is sort of the frustrating nature of planning. One thing, Madam Chair, I did see that there's still a hand up. I don't know if that's from before.
I think it's from before.
Okay, so I'll just, Ms. Jacobson, I don't know if you wanted to speak or just want to make sure. Okay, so in this same item, Madam Chair, if I could, I think I could just move on. If you're okay.
Yes, yes.
One important item I wanted to discuss because of what we discussed last time was this project assessment. And this kind of spurred our frustration, really. So the project assessment where Kittleson and Company was going to work with our member agencies to assess their needs for the coming year and align it with funding. We took a pause mostly because one of our partners got really, really sick. She's fine now. But it was good for us to take a step back because we discussed last time, there are things that don't make any difference in animal strikes, but there are things that do work, like the advanced signing technology. That's when it's foggy out, it knows to alert drivers to a potential wildlife crossing. So in our regional transportation plan, we have a project for wildlife warning signing from milepost 334 to 348. I don't know what that is. But it's a $10,000 project. That's what it cost us during the regional transportation plan. We'll sort of reassess it because I'm sure costs have gone up a little bit. But that's one that I'm going to have Kettleson and Associates analyze for EMAC specifically, because that could be a project that we've got the funding for, it's been vetted properly. So we know that it's an appropriate project. And it's kind of one that I'm thinking might be one of our first babies that we can do together, is this advanced signing technology project.
I always ask if it's possible or through what means could private citizens make donations towards specific projects? And, you know, now that I think many of us are getting daily requests for information, that we shouldn't discount it. Or if we channel the money through Game and Fish with specific, you know, targeted areas, if that's a possibility. So I'm throwing it out again, because I mean, there's some very generous people in the community. I think we shouldn't overlook that.
Well, and I'll let Benny speak to that a little bit, but we had discussed when I very first started the importance of public-private partnership. And I think this group is in a good position due to our connections in the community to start those conversations. There's probably unlikely an avenue that anybody could donate to a quasi-governmental organization like ourselves. But for example, when I mentioned the Heritage Zoo, the zoo, and how they have a sponsorship program for animals, if there's a way we could foster a conversation with them to consider sponsorship of tunnel fencing, working with private landowners, these are the better avenues to get real stuff done to that end, using public dollars like that.
Or partnering with an association like the Animal Foundation.
Exactly, yes, exactly. They'll have more flexibility in being able to take in public donations.
Or Granite Dale.
Or Save the Dells.
Exactly.
Or Granite Dells, yes. So, yeah, those are the avenues that's how we would do that. So I think that there's an untapped public-private partnership resource that we could probably start. And I think that's another thing the consultant can help us with, where then we start to have those conversations with the community.
And that's all I was gonna say, Lindsay. We could spell that out, JD, in the plan. What does that look like, you know, so that we're obeying all the rules and regulations of CYMPO, if you will, and how could we participate in something like that without violating any government rules, I guess. But it's a good idea.
You know, I for one am not too proud that I wouldn't go begging to different committees. People worry, guys. But yeah, it would need to be set up legally and effectively.
Right. Yeah, so to Ms. Jacobson's point about this being, you know, a pause or anything, I think this is exactly, we're in the right time. CYMPO's growing. EMAC is more passionate than ever. We've got a lot of meaty projects coming up. So I think this is the time to go to this endeavor, so.
It's out of sequence, Madam Chair, but I'm also concerned that we have a couple of members who haven't attended meetings either in person or on the internet, and that does concern me. So can maybe be put on the next month's agenda or the next meeting agenda, what we need to do about that, please.
And I guess not to keep repeating what I said, things like that too, JD, we can put in the plan, you know, what happens with absences of members, who's serving.
Set the policies on how many.
Things like that. So it wasn't, that's just, we want to be sure that we give, we want to set everything up for success. And that's a great point, JD. I would say we can bring it up at the next meeting, but know that would also be part of the plan to spell that out, things like that.
My remaining updates, Madam Chair, SR 69 urbanized corridor master plan that Vinny just brought up. We just informally kicked it off with the consultant who is Kittleson and Associates. Vamshi Yelasetti is the project manager who will basically report to me. I'm the project manager for CYMPO. So that will formally kick off with our TAC at the beginning of January. But since we did an informal kickoff, that means that Vamshi can start some preliminary tasks for us and get paid for that by us. So there will be more updates to come. As we've been discussing, that's scheduled to conclude around the same time as Sundog Connector, so that the community, our electeds, have a lot to discuss and have a lot to look at. So another update from me is on the Sundog Connector. we changed the meeting for today to hopefully align with the next stakeholder meeting that was scheduled for December 1st. At the 11th hour, we found some really critical, exciting, new, not necessarily new, but we got some new information that will impact how AECom needs to engineer some drafted preliminary design for us for presentation. So the point was to have that presentation for you here today. And I'm here to tell you that presentation hasn't happened. And it's because we got a lot of new, really great information that AECom needs to take back to the drawing board with. So I'm rescheduling that as the information comes in. So I'm working closely with the City of Prescott to keep that project going. Just so you know, they're on task right now. They're working on the design for the 2 alternatives that they'll present to the community, and then a no build alternative to go with it. So not much to update on the Sunbelt connectors. If there are no questions on those two, I did want to introduce Brent Stotler to the group. Brent is the project manager for the active transportation plan, sometimes called the alternative transportation plan, if you are involved in this kind of work. So if there's no further questions, I'll kick it over to Brent to give us that update.
Just one quick comment,
Sure.
Lindsay. For information, I think that mile marker you mentioned is in the area of Drake, up there, Drake or Del Canyon.
Oh, okay,
And there's
okay.
Heavy wildlife across
That makes sense. Okay. Good to know. Thank you.
The advanced warning sign project he was talking about, I think is somewhere in the general area of the Drake cement plant up in the forest.
The only thing that I remember is
Don't
that
quote me on that. That's
that
my
the
best
Jeff-
guess.
at one of the meetings that he came to consult with us, he said that unfortunately, some of the signage, people just start tuning it out after a while.
Well, so there was specific research on that. So there are static signs that do no good at all. And then there's research on dynamic signage that reduced 30% of strikes.
So
I
that
think
if
that's
there's
better than
something
nothing.
flashing, it's more
Yeah.
effective.
Yeah,
It's activated.
and it can detect.
There is a wildlife re-fencing project up on 89 closer to Ashford, north of Drake.
Okay.
That Game and Fish has separated the wildlife fencing so that when they get inside the right of way, they have more area to scope out and figure out how they're gonna run across the road instead of sneaking under the fence, and they've got 20 feet and they're standing there and cars are zinging by them and they start getting skittish. So there is work being done a little bit further outside the normal urban area, but stuff like that. Those are alternative type projects from just considering the wildlife crossing, bridge, that kind of stuff. So
I'll never forget one of the executive board meetings when Mary Mallory talked about driving home one evening in Prescott Valley. And around Gosford Hill, there were pronghorn in the middle of the street, and they were just panicked because they didn't know where to go. And how sad she felt that there hadn't been any mitigation in that area. So
Awful.
it comes very close to home.
Yeah, so I'll kick it over to Brent.
Thanks for the intro. Madam Chair, members of the committee, Brent Stotler, I'm a planner with CYMPO. It's great to be back here. I had a original engagement with CYMPO back in 2017 to 18. There's still a lot of familiar faces on the EMAC. That's a testament to your passion and commitment to these issues. And it's really great to be back in the room with a lot of you that I worked with before. I come back to CYMPO as of the end of June of this year, and I am planning with a focus on transit and multimodal options. So what I'm really pleased to introduce to you all today is that CYMPO is going to undertake a planning process for active transportation. This is the first plan of its type in our region and for the region. And I just want to highlight some of the plan components and what we'll be focusing on and how you guys can help us. The plan is, we're working on the scope of work right now. We have a sort of bare bones scope outline that includes the following items, and a lot of these you'll recognize as typical plan parts. Obviously, we do goals and visioning for the plan. Part of the plan will be to inventory existing facilities for an active transportation plan. That means bicycle facilities, facilities that create safe situations for pedestrians, and connections to transit in particular. We will be developing the scope over the next couple of months, and we're going to bring it back to both the EMAC and the TAC working group meetings in January. That's the plan currently. We'll let you know if that changes. To get back to the plan components again, inventory of existing facilities, that leads us to origin and destination. Where are people leaving from, and where are they most often heading to? That type of data really informs this type of plan. We always look at land use and development planning. We need to know where neighborhoods are going, where there is housing, where there is an increased need for people to move to and from their homes to employment, education, medical services, etc. We always undertake a plan like this with a safety lens. We want to make sure that our most current safety data is incorporated into this plan so that we have good baseline information to operate off of to create even safer pedestrian and bicycle facilities in the region. That also includes a look at how people get to and from schools, how children who are pedestrians can get to and from school safely, how parents who are motoring their children to schools get there safely, and obviously how students riding buses get to and from school safely. So that is a particular component of the safety look. We want to establish a complete network. So we're looking for gaps and deficiencies. We're also looking for opportunities to complete connections between transit outposts, between educational outposts, getting people to shopping, getting people to employment. Part of this plan will include an equity analysis. Some of the funding for this plan is derived from some of the most recent infrastructure bills, and we are, as a part of that, required to do an equity analysis that addresses how accessible these transportation facilities are for varying populations in our region. And we look for those gaps to help the underserved populations increase their equity in our transportation network. We will obviously be looking at some specific projects, and we want them to be viable and basically shovel ready, for lack of a better way of putting it, but we will have a project and prioritization of projects part of the plan. Technology. We've got people riding e-bikes. We've got people on one wheels. We've got all kinds of new ways to get around. And while that isn't a focus of the plan, it has to be a component of the plan so that we can really adapt our environment to acknowledge these new forms of transportation. Along with the projects and prioritization, we're looking for implementation, and that may even be some light design concepts that we can take straight to an implementation of a build scenario. So we're really excited to roll this out. This is an area of planning that I haven't had the opportunity to work in before. It's all new, and it's all new to the region, so I'm very excited about it. We look forward to selecting a consultant probably in the beginning of the second quarter in 23, so April, around then, and looking for our various board approvals and a project kickoff by May. The project process will be about 12 months. So we are looking at a project completion of around April to May of 2024. So this is, a forward-looking plan. One of the first orders of business is to determine who our key stakeholders are in the community. Certain jurisdictions, like the city of Prescott, has a pedestrian bicycle technical advisory committee, and I attend those meetings. I am interested in whether there are other less formal committees or special interest groups that are focused on this type of transportation and that have an interest in increasing the presence of safe facilities for pedestrians and bicyclists in the region. So that will be part of what you hear from me next, which will be to basically send out a call for stakeholder ideas, names, connections. And from that point, we will get into, in the first quarter of 23, reviewing the scope of work and moving this project towards selecting a consultant.
That just brought you guys talking and generate new ideas. And Vinny, thank you for your patience, Vinny. But I'm just wondering, you know, we're going to be doing a lot of work. Bryn's going to be doing a lot of work. All of this sounds really great. Is it at all possible that perhaps with the support of the TAC and EMAC, that the executive committee might be able to make recommendations to the member organization, the county and all the municipalities regarding, especially now that there's the Prescott's looking at their new plan. County is just finishing up their new plan, but the things regarding some safety issues be included, and perhaps my dream that there would also be something to the building codes that of all of these municipalities in the county that would introduce the concept of leaving corridors, even if they're only 10 feet wide, through all the developments, and actually formalize something along these lines in each municipality in the county's regulations, so that they would become institutionalized and not just a dream.
Great points, JD. I guess I have two quick answers to it. Is I would hope that CYMPO could absolutely play that active role. Again, if you look at what is the makeup of the executive board, you know, that they serve with a regional hat, but then they return to their municipalities representing those. So it's a fluid conversation. Very specific though, to your last point, JD, Bryn and I are brainstorming with the scope, and we are attempting to gauge what level of influence as it relates to policy and development could this play, you know, so you're on the right track. And again, we're trying to, you know, stay within our lane as to what's appropriate, realizing that, we'll just use Prescott as an example. We have Mayor Good on our board, and we have the city engineer, Ian Mattingly, and then other staff members participate. So for Prescott, you know, we would want to play a critical role in those conversations. We recognize ultimately it's up to their jurisdiction, their council, if you will, but we do want to play that role. So it's active very much in the scope that Bryn talked about, and we hope that through this planning process, we can make a compelling case that through the process, it's been identified these are the recommendations. Again, we don't want to dictate, we don't want to surprise anyone, so everyone will be included of it. But we do think this is the best avenue to deliver something like that. So as far as I'm concerned, you're on the right track.
If we could do it for dark sky, we could do it for the wildlife, we could do it for people who need transportation.
Yeah. We think that this could play a role in that conversation. We realize CYMPO, if you will, we're in the back seat to some of these development conversations, but we believe if Prescott Valley, whoever is working through CYMPO, why would they not use that as part of their negotiations and agreements, if you will?
Frank, do you see something like that being too outrageous for Chino Valley?
No, we've already had discussions with Bryn. As far as Chino Valley specifically, we're currently on the development side of things, updating the town's general plan.
So you're working on that now too?
Yeah, right now. The Matrix is the consultant helping the town with the update. They've already had a series of public meetings. The next series of public meetings is in February, I believe. So you can go to the town website. It might be makeitchino.com, might be the specific general plan website. And looking at components specifically for active transportation, I know it's not really a plan at this point, but in Public Works, we have a map of the major arterials and collectors in town and kind of what we want the council's vetted this map and approved it, where to put a paved multi-use path versus an unpaved trail. Chino's got their own unique circumstances, a lot of equestrian up there. So not everyone wants a paved trail. They want that perhaps, wheelchair accessibility is an issue to consider. Equestrian use and horse footing and things is also considerations they make in the more spread out in rural areas. And we have everything from 7,000 square foot lots to 20 and 40 acre tracts of land. So
we could give some,
yeah,
and if it couldn't get all done before this, then at least private citizens could maybe come to
sure.
meeting and
It's all
bring up
public.
the idea.
It's all
JD,
public.
I'm really glad that you brought up, this is Bryn, for those of you on the web. I'm really glad you brought up that jurisdictional component, because it's important to acknowledge that while this is a regional plan and it will be a regional look at active transportation, we realize that the individual incorporated areas and settlements, villages, and so forth have their own unique character, and not everybody is going to be on the same build option. It's going to look a lot different. Prescott Valley is in the process right now of actually identifying and prioritizing putting in sidewalks and pedestrian crosswalks. That's something that they developed without. So they have a completely different, set of priorities, than, let's say, the city of Prescott.
But if we don't bring up these ideas to each of the municipalities and at least give them a chance to consider it, we're losing out.
Sure. And it is, that is one of the things that I really hope to gain through the planning process, is just that each jurisdiction and each member agency has something, a takeaway from the plan that is implementable. And as a new e-bike owner, I'm realizing that living in downtown Prescott, it's not really the ideal environment to have an e-bike. So I'm recognizing, even in my own environment, the insufficiency or attention that hasn't been paid to this, because it wasn't a priority at the time that Prescott developed. So we have to do some adaptation. We have to look at real opportunities. And I think we're on the right path. So other questions or comments?
Yeah, you're thinking in the right way.
Any other questions or comments about active transportation plan? All right, thank you.
Madam Chair, that was it for my updates. That was a big one.
Okay. I'm sorry, I had to step away to help my manager get into a Zoom meeting. So we're kind of lack of staff today, so I'm kind of all over the place. Okay, next item. Consideration and possible action to approve the October 24th, 2022 meeting minutes of the EMAC. Does anyone have any changes or comments in regards to the minutes? Or anyone want to make a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Elizabeth. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I
Approve. Any nays? Nope. Okay.
No,
Got you right there.
there are no nays.
No nays. Okay. Number 7, consideration and possible action to approve the 2023 meeting schedule of the EMAC. Lindsay?
I'm gonna use that next time.
We're just sharing the screen now.
Yeah.
We think.
It was there just a minute ago.
Meet next year is a good summary.
Yeah, we're going to meet next year. Yes.
Yes. From what I'm seeing, it looks like it's set up as quarterly, unless otherwise, and then as we just said it before, unless we feel that we need to have a meeting otherwise, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Quarterly plus. So there's 5 meetings listed right now.
Can you see the screen, Tammy?
Yes.
And so I think at the last one, we had discussed every other. And that might be what this consultant recommends that we start to do. But I think this schedule allows for at least meeting every quarter plus a fifth. And keeping in mind that this is when we're going to start thinking about breaking apart into committee assignments, doing some things off cycle that can and help the action of this group. So I present this to you for your consideration.
Is there any discussion by any members? Does anyone want to make approval of the meeting schedule as presented?
Move that we accept the quarterly meeting dates as indicated with the provision that we would be flexible should the need arise.
Okay, is there a second?
A second.
Okay, all those in favor say
Right.
aye. Oh, yeah, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nope, passed unanimously. What's next? Give me a second to get up there. Oh, is there anything else to the order today? Anyone else?
I don't think so.
No? Okay, well, it is 2:19 and we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.